Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be guiding today's conversation. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day and an even better week. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about value. Oftentimes when we think about organizations and value, we're thinking, okay, I have materials, right? I have resources, I have, the workforce coming together to, at different stages, add value, time and energy, and maybe further resources through a value stream, right? Which is essentially from the time that customer sends in an order until the order ships, your value stream. And at each stage along the way, more value is added, right? So something that gets halfway through the process now is half the value of what it will eventually be, right? So if it was a $20 item, it's halfway through, it's roughly $10, give or take. Okay, so you have a value stream, and you have different stages within that value stream, right? And those obviously your uh, processes and procedures are made up. Your standard work is essentially reflects what you do at each of those stages to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do, not just because, but so that we're accurately creating the value at each stage that we intend to, right? So that at the end, the product turns out the way we want it to. The whole concept of quality then is that we're doing that to such an exacting degree that at the very end and along the way, the product meets the specifications as designed, right? Now, this could also be service too, just depends on how your operation is set up and what you do, product or service. But essentially, that's essentially what your value stream is. And so when we're thinking about adding value to something, right? Now, think about it if you're making a product. It's simpler if we think about it in those terms. If we're doing admin work, it isn't to say that admin work isn't necessary. There's necessary admin work, administrative work, okay? Paperwork, right? But the paperwork doesn't necessarily add value to that product. And so we would call that non-value added, uh, non-value added processes, right? Uh, Tasks, right? Functions, whatever. So there's value added, where we're actually adding value to the product, and non-value added. A lot of times what happens is that we get caught up in a bit of a twist and twirl of doing non-value added items, taking time to stop in the value added, right? Stop in that value stream. And it doesn't necessarily mean we're wanting to stop. Maybe we've set up our processes and procedures in such a way that it requires actually put a requirement on ourselves to divert our attention from value added to non-value added because it's important but not vital to the product, right? So so this is what happens, and when you start to add up all these micro to macro interruptions, right? So HR functions, right? We know we have to do them. We know that's part of admin of an organization, but it doesn't add value. There's no value, zero value whatsoever to an HR function. Okay, it doesn't add one iota of value. The one exception, and it's also non-value added, but it's very important, is if they're doing recruiting. You want to recruit, right? Personnel, right? New team members who are going to what? Meet our value add processes and procedures that we do. They're going to add to that. They're going to accentuate. They're going to elevate that, not maintain it. Maintain it, really? Yes, we have to maintain it, but we also have to elevate it. Why is that? Because everything is always should be growing, developing, and improving all the time. We should be open to improving every step and stage along that value stream. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean we can stop right now to do that. There are instances when we run into trouble where we may have no choice, right? Something breaks down or we have to do a workaround, that forces us to deal with this thing eventually, right? If you've been doing band-aid fixes, now guess what? Now you don't have a choice. Band-aid fix isn't going to fix what you've been band-aiding up. Now you have to do a wholesale upgrade, change, transforming processes and procedures, right? So even how work is conducted by personnel, same concept, right? So adding value. So that stuff makes sense, right? Value added. We're adding value to our product or service. Great. But what we also know too, and it isn't difficult, all of this is logged. If you think it isn't, if you think, well, how could you ever know? Well, because every organization has to submit documentation and it's all tracked. And we know that organizations in the US don't report their full capacity. So therefore, they don't necessarily aren't necessarily factoring in their effectiveness or efficiency based on their total capacity. So let's pretend like you have, for easy math, 10 hours of work capacity during the day. Well, a half an hour of that is going to be somebody's lunch, on your team. Probably got a couple of 15-minute breaks, maybe more, depending, when you start to get stretched a day beyond 8, it varies, right? But you're essentially going to have time off of that. So out of a 10-hour day, we're probably not going to have any greater than 9 hours. But in reality, we do have some admin things that happen, so let's lop off another half hour. So we'll say 8.5 hours-ish of a 10-hour day is total capacity, right? Well, what does that represent? 85%, right? Well, if 85% is your 100 now, right? That is your 100%. It's 8.5 hours out of 10 is 85% of that day, right? However, your total capacity is 85, but that is now your new 100, okay? So I know, it may seem a little confusing, but just follow. So essentially you have a total capacity. Well, what happens is that oftentimes organizations don't acknowledge their total capacity. So therefore, when they're reporting how effective and efficient they are, they're not basing it on total capacity, okay? And because it is sloppy reporting and inaccurate reporting in many cases, you would think if they were going to err, they'd error high. And they probably are erring high. The difficulty, though, is because of hidden costs and waste and poor quality, the high cost of poor quality, and so many negative impact costs that go into it. We could basically pull about 71% effectiveness if we didn't use any gimmicks, okay? Now you take out layoffs, you take out the hidden costs and some of the things that are not, that the system allows for, basically. Legal, right? They're legally allowed for. The difficulty is that they still skew our effectiveness. So we may have seen a mean, or I won't even say a mean, an average of 71% in the United States effectivity, we're really probably pulling in the 60s. And some numbers that I've pulled show in the 30s, which is scary, right? That is scary. So why am I bringing this up? Well, what I'm telling you is you're there in your organization, right? It doesn't matter what organization you are. It doesn't matter if you're working at the DMV, if you're part of a government organization, private organization. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a hospital, insurance company. It doesn't matter who you are. But that our effectiveness is so low. What does that mean to our value? Well, essentially, where does the cost of our ineffectiveness wind up? it winds up with the consumer paying more. We're essentially paying more for less. If you were wondering why costs are so high, and it's not the only reason, of course, but a considerable reason is we're just not good, folks. We think we're good, but even some of the most, we'll say, the most effective organizations still use gimmicks and so forth, and bookwork, legal bookwork, to situate things to make them appear way more effective than they are. I virtually, and I can say this for most people, and I think you would agree. If you're a doctor and I had you walk into a manufacturing plant, I guarantee you could find something to improve upon. You have no concept of the product they make. You may walk through it and just get a grasp of it. Easily within a day, you could find something to improve, right? Yeah, you have people working in manufacturing who have been doing the same thing for 20, 30, 40, more for some, right? And I'm just using some examples. You could take a supervisor off in manufacturing and have them walk through a hospital and finds all kinds of also areas to improve. But there tends to be this brother, sisterhood, whatever you want to call it, of lockout, right? We don't improve. This is ours. This is our space, and we don't improve. We don't ever let anybody in there to help us. God forbid we should do anything to help our customers, right? God forbid we should do anything to limit the excessive overcharge to customers, the excessive waste, right? God forbid we should ever do that. God forbid we should ever let anybody. But I'm telling you, folks, you don't have to be a genius to necessarily go in and find things to improve. The challenge, more often than not, the harder challenge is to get people to start seeing what they've been doing for so long and conditioned, right? You've been so conditioned. You've been a prisoner, right? You essentially have organizations in different industries who have agreed upon limitations. What do I mean about agreed upon limitations? Agreed upon limitations are, well, if we're all working in the same field, say any organization, right? I don't want to pick one because then it'll look like I'm picking on somebody, and I could literally, there's thousands to choose from, right? So, but you go in an organization, but the agreed upon limitations, what is that? Well, hey, I like the way we do this. This is good. Yeah, it's comfortable for me. It's about comfort and about what we can do and manage. And people move at their plodding pace, right? And it doesn't mean we have to be unsafe or sprint. I'm not saying that. But you see, it's a comfortability. Some people move slower at work and actually respond. You know, it's not about moving your body, but it is about responsiveness, right? Some people are so poorly responsive. They respond better when they hit the parking lot to get in their car to race home, right? Just look at the traffic, people trying to get home. You would think that they are racing toward their home because it was on fire, right? And you would understand it if that was the case. But they don't really work at that pace, right? You ever notice that? It's pretty obvious. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see this. You don't see a lot of folks in a hurry in some organizations, right? And I don't mean in an excessive hurry. I just mean with a mode of getting it done for the customer, right? You don't see that emotive passion for the customer. You see a passion for themselves, but you don't see that necessarily all the time. So when you start to look at just the subtlest things and you get deeper into it, these agreed upon limitations have now become a cultural lexicon when it comes to organizations. And organizations now are okay with being very ineffective. And essentially, we have set our system up, right? Our financial system, all the rest of it has been set up to what? To cater to our lack of ability to produce value at a at a high rate, whether that be a productivity side or whether it be a quality side, right? Whether it be a responsiveness to customer queries and so forth. We have dumbed that down. And we think, oh, well, we're doing the best we can. Well, but are we? But are we really doing the best we can? I mean, statistically, we can look at, hey, look, folks, these are numbers the organizations have reported. I'm not making this up. Okay. There are few of you who are best in class. That's why they call it best in class, because there's maybe, handful at best around the country in your industry, right? Out of the thousands that probably exist for each industry, right? So are we doing our best? Are we doing our best if we have to use gimmicks, if we're not reporting our true capacity and therefore misreporting our effectiveness, right? And in the process of doing that, because of the data that's out there, it still can be found and seen. What you think you were hiding can't be hidden. That's the amazing part. You're all taking part in a shared illusion. You believe you're good. And because you believe you're good, you're not motivated to get better. Because you're not motivated to get better, right? You're not motivated to open yourselves up to that, to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what, this process has existed for a long time, but we can make it better, right? We can improve upon this. We can build upon this, right? Now, it doesn't mean that your heart is in a bad place. You just conditioned yourself, right? You conditioned yourself. It would be like a mechanic in a shop just throwing the tools all over the floor, right? You've conditioned yourself to walk around over all these tools versus putting them in their proper place. And because of that, you've got to search out tools. Even thrown all over the floor, you still have to go hunt and peck for those tools, right? To do that job or the job that you're about to do. But if you put everything in its proper place, right, then you can go right to it. You can go right to it. You can go right to it. And this is how setting up your processes more effectively gets you to become more responsive without having to fall all over yourself to hurry, right? Everybody's afraid, oh, well, I have to hurry. Well, that's just not intelligent, right? That's not smart at all. If you have to hurry that much, right? Not only is your process broken, but there's other things broken. If the environment you work in is so frenetic that everybody is just running around like they're in a crazed sense of themselves, then something is definitely not set up correctly or significantly broken in your organization. Now, we can talk about mechanical equipment, we can talk about process, but we can also talk about culture because it all comes back to people, folks. It all comes back to us. In the end, what's inside of us is what comes out of us, right? So if we're not emoted on the inside, do you think we're going to be like that on the outside? No. If we don't believe in teamwork, really believe that within each of ourselves, do you think we're going to exhibit that or much less partake in that? No, of course not. And so, in short, we are essentially undercutting value potential within our organizations in a massive way. We're taking part in a shared illusion, and that shared illusion is that we have agreed upon limitations that we've canonized into the way that we operate. And the only way for us to reverse that is to what? Start to ask the questions, start to examine, and be more critical about how we conduct business and how we handle each other, how we work as a team, how we work to develop our team, all of it. It's 360 degrees, folks. Is it easy? No, it's not going to be easy, but it's also not going to be hard. It's going to be kind of fun. It's kind of an adventure. And it's an adventure we're taking. Why is that? Because the little bit of efforts that you put toward this is going to show exponential results, folks. You do one thing, you're going to see 2 or 3 times the result. It's a domino effect. I guess, and on that note, I'll go ahead and tie it up by saying, hey, look, let's go ahead and try to hit those good green dominoes 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, and encourage one another, not just within culture, but also within our organizations, on our teams, people working side, shoulder to shoulder with and side by side with, and those we lead, all of them. And when we do that, not only are we helping to transform all of organizational culture and culture, but we're transforming ourselves, and that becomes a reciprocal loop, right? And then we start to break down our limitations. Then we start to see that we don't have limitations. We start to see that we were in an illusion, and we start to wake up from that illusion. All right, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day. We'll go ahead and tie it up for now. I hope you're having a good day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, take care.